Thanks everyone for attending today. Again, today we're going to be talking about sharing data from Autodesk Vault to the world, I guess, to the field, but also to other folks. So I'd like to start with talking about, this. Some of this may be obvious to most folks, but I really wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for what we share and the reasons we share data, especially like outside the firewall. I'll talk a little bit about the ways people share today, just so we kind of are all on the same page regarding what we share, why we share it, and how we share it today. Talk a little bit about some of the issues we have with sharing. I talk with a lot of different companies in my role here at Hagerman, and very often we're working with folks who need to get data to someone in a certain way, and they're struggling to do it in a way that makes everyone happy. So I see a lot of this, and I've kind of put my thoughts together as part of this presentation. And then we'll finish up talking about, I mean, it's technically not a new way to share data, but I think it's really starting to mature. And I think there's a ton of potential in this method, and that's specifically using Autodesk Construction Cloud and specifically from within that suite, Autodesk Docs, to share data outside of your firewall. And a great, very easy way to get data from your environment, including Autodesk Vault, into Docs to pretty much, I think, make just about everybody in the situation happy. So the way I thought of breaking this whole topic down was kind of in three major ways that we share information or reasons, right? It may be a customer requirement. We may need to share data. It may be part of the contract that we create within our company in specific formats. We may have to provide PDFs. We may have to provide submittal packages, things like that. We may need to share because our customers require it. Another major reason would be operations in the field. If we sell equipment that needs to be installed in a building, if we sell buildings that need to be built in the field, we're going to have folks out in the field, either our own staff or contracted third parties may be installing our equipment or building our equipment. And it's not always easy to access data that has been created within the organization and is stored, say, on a company server somewhere. If you're out in the field, it may be hard to get to that. And then finally, contractors, right? We talk with companies every day that are strapped for engineering resources. More and more, we've got either wholly third parties that are contracted that need access in some way to the existing data that we've created, or maybe subsidiaries that are new to the company, like maybe a recent acquisition where we need to do some collaboration, but IT hasn't gotten around to connecting everybody in a permanent, safe, secure way. So those are the three sort of major areas that I thought about, breaking this down into. Those are usually the three of the biggest needs that we hear from our customers. So let's dig more now into, again, why and what we share. And with those three major areas: customers, field operations, and contractors. And so in terms of what we share, if we're talking about sharing data with our customers, sometimes we need to send data in a native format, meaning an AutoCAD drawing, an Inventor assembly, maybe not native format, but like a more detailed format, like a step file or say a Revit family extracted, right? We often need to send simplified versions of our assemblies, say in a detailed Inventor assembly. We typically or often will need to group some of these files together in like a submittal. They need to be packaged up, and maybe we need to keep track of things. There's often feedback involved, right? And often there's some sort of process, informal or otherwise, where we prepare a submittal, we send it off to the customer, they send it back with some sort of approval, right? Even if you don't have a system in place, like a digital system to guide this process, there's still some process. Right now, field operations is significantly different. whereas a customer might need full detail, a simplified version, sorry, field operations will often need full detail. They also need to be able to navigate, say, a data set easily. It needs to be easy to get to. It needs to be accurate. We need to be able to resolve issues in the field that come up. And contractors, again, we often need to share in similar ways across these groups. Contractors are almost always going to need native format data with full detail. One unique thing about contractors is there's often bidirectional updates necessary. We need secure access because especially because of the bidirectional nature, they're writing stuff back. That collaboration is often asynchronous. And again, there usually should be some sort of process there, right? So kind of breaking these down a little more, again, native formats, you might need to provide, again, an AutoCAD drawing, an inventor assembly. Sometimes you may not, depending on the relationship, maybe you don't want to provide full detail to a customer because that would expose some of your intellectual property. If you sell equipment that goes into a building and it's eventually going to go into a BIM or like a Revit model, all of that detail is just going to cause problems in your customer's model, so it needs to be simplified. When it comes to things like submittals, you really need to document exactly what was provided and when it was provided. There could be contractual obligations. If you have, if it's a project that maybe hasn't been going well, you may really need to document what's going on and keep track of who said something was okay. Because then if they decide to change their mind and go back, you really need that documentation to say, this is what you said was okay, back in August, and now we're at a disagreement, and this is what we sent you, and here's what you said about it, right? So it's very helpful to have that information if you need it. Feedback in this situation is critical, right? The whole point of sending this to a customer is to get their approval. They need some way to say, yes, I approve, be it an email or even like a signature on a piece of paper. And that, of course, involves process. And there may be even multiple participants on both sides, both your side and your customer side. For field operations, the needs are different, right? You don't always necessarily need the native format. And sometimes, again, it may be like viewing, say, native inventor data on a tablet is pretty much a no-go, right? But you still need all of the detail, maybe even down to every nut and bolt, because if you're doing work in the field, you need to know where everything is. People in the field, they may not be as computer savvy, say, as the engineers using CAD. You need a way for them to get to this data easily and to consume it easily and interact with the tool in a way that enables their job and doesn't have them scratching their head figuring out how to get to something or use it. Accessibility, it's got to be available outside the network often, and it needs to be accurate. It needs to be represent, the thing they're looking at in the field or the parts they have in front of them that they're trying to assemble out in the field. And this may not be the latest available data from engineering. It may be specific to what was built 6 months ago or, a specific revision that was shipped to that customer, right? And then, of course, issues and that pop up in the field, and they need some way to get those resolved, be it large or small. They need to get those things resolved so they can get the equipment installed, so they can get out of there and the customer can start using the product. And then, of course, contractors. A lot of contractors in the world these days. The work they do must integrate or reintegrate back with in-house work, right? So the native format is a requirement in that case. They obviously need full detail. The updates must be bidirectional, right? You've got to be able to send them data, and they have to be able to send data back to you. And there may be situations where they're working on the same files that you have at different times, right? And they could be anywhere in the world. So very likely not inside your firewall, right? So that data's got to be transmitted and stored securely through the firewall. And again, some sort of process involved. Half the group here is using Autodesk Vault Professional. My guess is the vast majority of you are using, if nothing else, Vault file lifecycles, where you've got some process of, work, review, release. The contractor ultimately needs to be able to participate in some process. If it's not directly inside your vault, it at least needs to be something approximating that somewhere, right? Now, the challenges we have for all these types of sharing, secure access is maybe one of the most common ones we come across today. You can't give VPN access to all your customers. Autodesk Vault Pro has a thin client, a browser-based way to access the Vault, read-only. That might be, from a functional standpoint, that might be good enough for someone at your customer to just technically crack open and look at something, but that's an inside the firewall thing. That's not to be shared with the world, right? So that's not going to work. You can't give VPN access to every customer. Every endpoint on the network is technically a risk. Again, we work with a lot of companies and a lot of IT departments. It's very clear that a lot of IT groups are, I don't know if I want to use the word scared, but very wary about things like ransomware. When it comes to contractors, for example, it's often they're managing their own devices. So if you just give every contractor you work with VPN access, that's just, you're increasing your footprint when it comes to risk. And then even within the system, even with like a document management system like Vault, it can be difficult or tedious to make sure that, say contractors get access only to the things they need to get to. And it can sometimes tie your hands in terms of how you configure your PDM or how you store your files. And then, of course, native formats, if you're talking about Inventor, file relationships, or AutoCAD drawings with XREFs, you've got to make sure you get all of that data collected if you're sending the native format to someone. Keeping the viewable versions of the native data synchronized can be time consuming. If you don't have it automated, it can be out of date, causing expensive mistakes. And then if you're not in the same system from a data management standpoint, process and review can be difficult, capturing what people say about something or capturing markups. Navigation, native Vault, it's an engineering tool. It's not always the easiest to use for people that don't sit in front of a computer all day long. There may be performance issues on mobile devices if it's even accessible at all. Mobile devices may just not be allowed on the company network at all. Best case, you've got a VPN. Now you've got VPN software on your tablet that you have to then connect to the company network so you can get into the Vault. Bidirectional updates are a huge problem if you're not inside the firewall. And then issue resolution, getting visibility to what's happened versus an email or a phone call. So with all of those challenges in mind, the way we've tried to meet those challenges over time, and I think these will be, everyone will be pretty aware of these things, sharing with customers what we see, sometimes paper, right? That's less common than it used to be 20 years ago, obviously. One of the first engagements I had with a customer here at Hagerman, they were printing out drawings and putting them in a tube and shipping them via UPS, right? These days, it's almost always going to be something like a PDF via email, right? But then the email goes, and did they get it? Did they read it? Did they actually look at the contents? What do they have to say about it? These days you might navigate, instead of sending an email, storing in some service like Dropbox, like a generic cloud storage that is just for quote unquote files of any type, right? When it comes to the field, paper might still be pretty common, or what I call static copies, just copies of files that have been copied to, say, a laptop for viewing, that are completely now disconnected from your environment, outside the control of the environment, can't be updated, right? And then maybe, some dedicated PDM features like the Autodesk Vault Thin client if you're inside the firewall, Vault Mobile if you're outside the firewall with Vault Gateway, or if you're just using a tablet or a phone. And then, of course, with contractors, email, obviously emailing stuff back and forth, which again, with the native formats is incredibly annoying. And then the same other features, right? Dropbox is real common with contractors, or in some situations, maybe dedicated PLM. So let's talk about why these traditional sharing methods aren't the greatest. And again, some of this stuff might be obvious, but just so again, we're all on the same page. Paper obviously is not the native format. There's no real process. It's not very accessible because if you don't have the paper, you don't have contents, right? Obviously not bidirectional. It could be secure technically because if there's just the one copy, but again, that copy could go anywhere. So security is maybe kind of a mixed bag. Paper can be great for feedback or review, right? You've got the whole drawing in front of you. If you got it on a D-size sheet, you can get plenty of detail. You can take a pen to it and go to town, right? So it could be good, but then getting that feedback back to somebody can be problematic because now you've got to give them a piece of paper. And if it's an engineer sitting at a desk trying to consume that stuff, now where do they put the D-size sheet on their desk, right? Email, secure, sort of. I mean, that email could end up going to anybody. Email causes a lot of breaches in companies, right? The native format is usually problematic if it's just a drawing. Maybe the drawing's small enough to email. Otherwise, sending an entire inventor assembly and drawings is a no-go. It's not very accessible, I would say, because you send the email to a person. Bidirectional, obviously, you can reply, things like that. Generic cloud's not the worst thing, right? Process and feedback. There are no markup tools in Dropbox that I'm aware of, at least for CAD files. Secure could be pretty good. Again, security for something like cloud is usually pretty good. Businesses hinge on keeping the stuff safe. Again, the native format is kind of iffy because file relationships, right? Dropbox doesn't understand what an inventor assembly is. Static copies are about the worst, right? You've copied it off to a computer somewhere, and then they're probably going to sit on that thing's hard drive forever. And 6 months from now, it might rear its head and it's now out of date. But at least it's the native format, right? When you're using a PDM system like Vault, something like the Thin Client or Vault Gateway, those are generally going to give you more options at least, right? Vault Mobile and the Vault Thin Client, those are not designed for sharing the native format at all. There's no bidirectional. Technically, you can upload things via Vault Mobile, but again, not the Thin Client. They're secure though, and they provide markup capabilities, and they provide access to process like in Vault Mobile. But there's still some holes. Now, Vault Gateway is probably the best method for sharing outside the firewall. If you're not familiar with Vault Gateway, that's a way that you can securely grant access to folks outside your firewall to your inside the firewall vault. There's a middleman server in the cloud that Autodesk maintains for you securely that allows communication outside the firewall, and then it talks to your Vault server. That gives you all the benefits of Vault, but some of the drawbacks too, like it's a little harder to use, so it's not quite as accessible to folks. And security, while it is definitely secure from a transmission standpoint, again, you've got those issues inside the Vault of how do we organize the Vault to grant access to people to see only what they're supposed to see inside the Vault. So the security issues with Vault Gateway, it's not that your data is going outside the firewall, because I still consider that secure. The security issues with Vault Gateway is how does it impact our inside the Vault security? And I think the combination of Autodesk Vault and Docs really can address all of these problems, from security to sharing native formats to review and process, accessibility, and even bidirectional information. I think it is a great potential solution for a lot of these problems that a lot of our customers face. Now, you may not be very familiar with Docs. I was not terribly familiar with Docs before we decided to put together this presentation. I have worked with it a little bit in the past. The last time I touched it was a few years ago, and it was pretty basic. I am very fond of where it is now. I think it is a great tool, right? You can control access within Docs based on users or companies or roles. You can control access to files at a project level or a folder level within a project. You can view what has happened to files, including when someone just looked at it. So if you want to know, did our customer actually look at this drawing before they said it was okay, you could actually go and see that, right? You can even grant public links to people if you want, and those links can have expiration, right? So you can say, we want to make this public for just a little bit because it's low risk, but we want to make sure it's not available forever. With the native format issue, you can synchronize data straight from your Vault, and you can even view native formats without any additional conversion, which we'll see here in a minute. There are built-in markup capabilities that are fantastic. Those markups can be tracked and marked off as completed There are review workflows within Docs that anywhere from very basic to complex. It's stored in the cloud with Autodesk's world-class cloud security. That means it's available anywhere outside the firewall, even on mobile devices. Again, the viewing without additional conversion, and then the bi-directional nature where you can actually synchronize data back to your Vault very easily. So let's dive in now and take a look at both products here, both Docs and Vault. So we're in Docs right now. So again, this is cloud file storage that is project-based. You have the concept of members, like users of the site. You also have the concept of companies, right? Organizations that are involved. And then there are roles within this system as well. The roles, I would say, are largely names, other than they do have a basic permission, like are they an admin or are they a participant? But the idea with the role is, you can say this person is this sort of thing, especially in the workflow. You can say, okay, the construction manager has to respond here. And you can create your own roles as well. A lot of options when it comes to security. Things can be templated, right? When we get into projects, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then there's a concept of apps as well. So this is a cloud service. There are documents in this environment, and there are tons of companion apps published by third parties to let you do something to this data. So really, we won't focus too much on it today, but getting this data into Docs is often the first step of some very powerful workflows, mostly construction related, right? But I'm confident that this is the way things are going in the manufacturing world as well, from a cloud file standpoint. Docs seems to be the way things are going for getting files stored outside the firewall. So let's take a look at projects now. We're going to create a new project here. As you might expect, there's information associated with this project, a name, maybe a number, a project type. These are all sort of default types of projects, again, largely construction related, but I'm just going to pick a demonstration project here. And again, our project templates, so the template is something you create with standard folders and I believe participants and things like that. Now within that project, you can control what aspects of the Autodesk Construction Cloud are used with this project, right? And you can see the account I'm using now, it doesn't have all of the advanced Autodesk Construction Cloud like Build. Someone just asked a question, how does this compare to Build? Docs is the foundation that something like Build is built on. Build accesses files, it gets those files from Docs. Okay. So now here's my project. I can add members to this project. I can add companies to this project. That's the information about that company. So, when you look at a project, who is this project for? There they are. There's your customer. An interesting thing, we can bridge across projects. We can share files, folders, even individual sheets of drawings, depending on the file format across projects. So you could have a project that has a bunch of your native data up in Docs, and then you could share portions of it out to other projects. Again, that idea of secure access. So that was all configuration, like admin stuff. Now this is the user experience, and you've got a home page, anything within the system that are assigned to you, recently viewed items, your bookmarks, etc. And then of course all the projects you're involved in, right? So this project that I just created, we can see what resulted from that was the template already has some folders configured and some files. So if you've got a standard project type or standard project types, you can populate it with certain documents like approval documents, standard Word documents or Excel files or even drawings if you wanted to, right? You can organize a folder structure. So it is like a file storage. You can even upload files to the project from the browser here. But if you have Vault, there's a better way to get files in there. So we can take a look at Vault now. For those of you that use Vault Basic or Pro, which was over half of the folks that replied to the poll, this should be familiar, right? And technically, the quote unquote folders in Vault Pro are actually, can interchangeably be referred to as projects, right? This is the Project Explorer in Vault Pro, right? So I created a new folder in my Vault, and we're going to set up synchronization. This is how easy it is to set up synchronization between Vault and Docs. And this is something we can show you how to do in minutes, literally. The idea is you have a Vault folder in the Vault that you map to a project within something like Docs, right? And it can even be down not just to a project, but to a specific folder within a project if you want, right? So obviously we pick a Vault folder here. This is just all the stuff in my Vault. And based on who is logged in to Vault at this time, I also have access to all of my Docs projects, including the project that I just created, that Vault Sync project, Vault Sync 2 project, right? And all those folders, right? So I didn't have to do anything special. All I had to do was be logged in to my Autodesk ID, like on my OS, just like you would be every day, right? Now that synchronization, it can be to the cloud, from the cloud, or bi-directional. Again, when you're dealing with something like contractors, for example, this is a way you can get files back from them into your Vault without them having access to your Vault, right? Now that synchronization, can be done on a schedule, right? So you could say every 8 hours, every 12 hours, or every day at a specific time, you could set up that synchronization. So that synchronization becomes automatic. You don't have to even think about it. It is also possible to synchronize on demand. So you can say, when I'm ready to, I'll send these files up when I'm ready by right-clicking and saying sync, like I can't remember the name of the command off the top of my head, but it's obvious when you look at it. But you can also, especially for the automated sync, you can put restrictions on it. So you could say, for example, we only want to send files up that have made it to the review state. Let's say this is for customer approval. Or we only want to send files up that are released so that your field service techs only see release data, right? And just like that, it's set up. Now, the way this works behind the scenes, we'll talk about that just a little bit, but there's no magic. We have the Autodesk desktop connector installed on a computer running the Vault job processor. That's it, right? The Autodesk desktop connector enables, a service that links the cloud folders to your desktop, and the Vault job processor will schedule that synchronization. So when it runs, when it's supposed to run, what it does is it essentially copies the files it's supposed to copy outside of the Vault to the folder so that the Autodesk desktop connector can synchronize them up. And that synchronization is aware of CAD file relationships. That's the important part, right? You see that folder right there. I didn't tell the sync to grab all of those files. I said grab the assembly, and the assembly, Vault knows all the file relationships. It pulled all those files out and synchronized the whole thing up, right? So all of those files made it from Vault to Docs just like that, right? Including, you see that inkjet printer prototype folder over there on the left. That includes all of the files that are necessary for that assembly to actually fully resolve, right? Now, Docs, once you get the files in there, it's got, search features just like you might expect. It also has viewing. But let's talk a little bit about field service now. Especially, so these are some of the advanced features you can do with Docs. So for example, we've got an installer out in the field. They're trying to install something and the wrong subassembly was shipped, right? So they need to let somebody know. Now they could get on the phone, they can send an email, right? They could also use docs to create an issue, right? They could say, here's the problem, here's the date, here's when I want this fixed by. And what's important about this that's better than a phone call or an email is they can link to a file that gives more information about the problem. And not just that, but they can point to a specific location in that file, like on a drawing, and say, here's the problem. Here's where I'm having the issue, right? You pin it, and now anyone who looks at that issue in docs can immediately see, they can go right to a drawing and see the issue, not just what was said about the issue, but literally, you know, when you click on that issue and you click on the drawing, you're able to do that. Now you can attach additional files if you want, but again, you know, you may just need the drawing view. So you click on the issue, you click on the drawing, and it takes you literally right to that spot in the drawing where that problem is. And you can track lots of different issues on this too, right? So from a communication standpoint, you know, helping especially from the field to the office, what is the problem? Where is the problem? How are we going to get this fixed? It's a great communication tool, and you can communicate that information within seconds. Now, one thing I find particularly interesting about docs, notice I've got some SolidWorks data here, right? Vault can manage SolidWorks data, just like AutoCAD data. This, what you're seeing here, is a SolidWorks assembly. I didn't have to do any conversion. I was just able to view it straight away in docs. Now, this is another way that you can create issues. Let's say I'm in the field, I'm looking at an assembly, I'm trying to figure out a problem. I call this up, okay, identify, here's the problem right here, right? So I can actually see all of the parts in the model. I can hide things. I can take measurements if I need to. And ultimately, if I figure out, okay, well, you know, maybe in this case, maybe I was set a part that was maybe a prior rev part where something doesn't fit anymore. I take some measurements and then I identify the issue, right? There's an issue button right there. I can, again, slap a pin right on this assembly, say, here's the problem. And now I'm creating an issue in the context of a drawing, or a model in this case, I should say, right? So again, explaining what the problem is. I can choose who this should go to, right? Members of the project. I could add additional files like a photo that I've taken or something. And then that's it. The issue is created. And now someone in the office can see that on their list and they can get to work resolving it, right? So they would come in once I'm in the office now, I take a look at it and there's the thumbnail, and then I can get down to the file, click on the file, and again, it takes me right to the model, right to where that issue is. And I don't have to guess where the problem is. It's right there in my face, right? Now, say from a customer review standpoint, we've got the concept of markups, right? So here's an inventor drawing. It natively captured all 7 sheets in the drawing. Again, no conversion necessary. It sort of does it in the cloud behind the scenes, right? We've got a great set of markup tools. You're probably used to these if you used, you know, an Autodesk markup tool, like just the web viewer in general. You know, whatever you might need to communicate this markup. But each of the markups is stored individually, like as a unit, so you can refer to it. So that means I can like attach a file to this markup for reference, let's say. And then all of those markups would appear in a list that I can see and react to, right? So here's a specific markup, right? So that I could, you know, publish it, I could delete it, I could duplicate that if I need, you know, to say another thing about that specific markup. And that's now tracked as an item. And when we look at the overall list of files, we can very quickly see if any of those files have any markups, right? So there's one markup there that's something that I need to look at. Now, once those markups are done, right, maybe now we create a review, right, or maybe we start it here, right? So we put some of these files into this review where essentially we're associating some files in our project with this review process, right? So these workflows can be configured to some degree. There are, I don't know, 7 or 8 different types of workflows. This is a very simple one that's just a couple of steps. You can have, several steps involved. You can have group participation at certain steps where multiple people have to say okay, right? And this is a workflow, right? You've got steps, you've got people involved, right? I didn't specify my reviewers properly. I left it as these roles within the project, that a project manager, and I hadn't assigned the project manager role to anyone, so I can also assign it to specific individuals, right? As opposed to, say, a role within the project if I'd rather work that way. Right. And now this is a workflow, and it's very straightforward to use. That review is created, notifications can go out, right? You can even get periodic notifications about a project, like what's happened within it within the last hour or the last day, right? And again, this is a very simple workflow, right? So when I look at this review now, there are only going to be essentially 3 steps along the top. It was initiated by me. There's the internal review step and then the customer review step. Now, what's nice about this is you actually trigger the start of that step. You say, okay, I've started on this now. So again, communication and tracking. So you know that someone has started the process, that part of the process they're involved in, right? They do their review, they respond, it goes to the next step, right? And, this is when they would start their review. And at the last step of the workflow, you can actually provide a final status for each of the documents. And those documents even could then, as part of the project, say be, copied or moved to another part of the project. So you could have a folder full of unreviewed documents, and as they get reviewed and approved, they can automatically get moved to a reviewed folder. So it's taking them off the list of stuff to do, right? So you can see now this is ultimately going to be all closed up, and those files have been copied over to another folder. So that's just like a taste, I would say, of what Docs can do, right? There are a lot of other things it can do, transmittals, specifications, right? And just kind of review of what we saw there. This synchronization, it gets one direction or bi-directional between Vault and Docs. It can be on demand or on a schedule. And again, it uses proven technologies of the Vault job processor and the Autodesk desktop connector, both of which have been around for years to execute this synchronization. It could be as simple as just getting those files up there for collaboration, right? Native file format that respects relationships. Or again, you can incorporate not only the advanced features of Docs, things like issues, reviews, transmittals, specifications, but also all of the other Construction Cloud functionality. So let's go ahead and get it wrapped up here. If you want to get some more information on Docs, we just published a great blog article with some great in-depth videos for what can be done with Docs. So there'll be a link to this. So if you're interested, you might just follow that link and bookmark it so you could check it out later. If your needs are more complex than the basics you saw here of synchronization, you can connect Docs with other cloud products such as Fusion Manage to communicate issues from Docs back to Manage, to integrate it with your existing Manage workflows. We can have more specific synchronization between Vault data and Docs via, again, the API from Autodesk Platform Services and Cool Orange. If you're familiar with Cool Orange, makes a great product called Power Jobs Processor that enhances the Vault job processor. They have released or are about to release, if it's not out already, something called Power Sync, which can greatly simplify communications with Docs. So all the things you do today with Power Jobs you could very easily incorporate synchronization with docs to that, right? And of course, all of those related workflows in the construction cloud, right? So what we talked about today was docs. You can see that's the foundation, right? Be it design collaboration, model conditioning, estimates, takeoffs, bid management, project and cost management, operations and maintenance. There's a whole suite of tools in the construction cloud that if you need that sort of functionality, often getting your documents into docs is the first step. And if you've already got that data in Vault, it's very straightforward to get it there. All right, and so that's my piece. I'd like to introduce Ken Christensen. He's going to wrap it up here with some of the next steps.
Yeah, thanks, Forrest. Yeah, I'd like to just add a couple comments here, and obviously, if there are any questions that you have, put them in the chat, and we'll follow up, as well as follow up with a recording of this session. So, we just kind of, in summary, again, the information you provided kind of shows people are at different steps, so we're very aware of that. So, some customers will not have Vault, some will have Basic, some will have Pro, some will have the cool orange software that Forrest just mentioned. So, we can help wherever you're at in your workflow and your process, and also let you know what's available as we go forward. So yeah, and there's a nice link in there for if you're new to this whole construction cloud, again, on the AEC world of Autodesk, this is a very common use case and product. But on the manufacturing side, where I personally work most of my time, this is relatively new, as Forrest mentioned. So we're excited to have an option for our customers to collaborate on the cloud. So again, continue to use your on-premise Vault workflow, whether that's in the cloud or not, but how do you communicate with people outside of your firewall, whether it's field techs, whether it's sales representatives, collaborating with customers. It's a really nice workflow that's now enabled. So again, thank you for your time. Any questions, just keep us posted, and have a great day.